Welcome to the video of class on January. I feel like it's the 18th today. So again, if you were not in class, then you're going to send me an email with the answers to this video. Please send it to me by this Friday at 5 o'clock in order to get your on-time credit for this class. And of course, the quality of the video will be looked at as well. And even if it's late, even though I take off 1 point per day that it's after that Friday, I will never take off for the quality. So those 4 points will always stay around. All right, so here we go. We began class today by looking at something that I asked you to look at in the Edpuzzle this week. That here we have the Torah talks specifically about the idea that a ben sorer umoreh, a stubborn or rebellious child, can exist. And when that child exists, they are put to death. Then we looked at another statement that said there has never been and there never will be a ben sorer umoreh. And my question was, how can these two statements be possibly true? Either one of them is true and one of them is false, or the other one is true and the other one is false, right? So either there is such thing as a ben sorer umoreh, and when you find that stubborn and rebellious child, you kill them, and then there is. So then this statement right here must be false, or there never has been, never will be, and this is kind of not even part of the Torah as well. That just must not be true. So the question is, how can they both exist? And the class basically said the following. Well, if you remember from our last class, what we did was we found all of these different loopholes, 11 different loopholes, which what they did was they basically narrowed down the possibility of who could actually be a ben sorer umoreh. They narrowed it down to a very specific person. Now, we haven't seen how the Mishnah is going to do it, but it's going to do that. But it's going to use these words to do it. So, for instance, rebellious or stubborn and stubborn and rebellious. Well, what if they're stubborn but not rebellious? What if they're rebellious but not stubborn? Can they be actually killed? So what the Mishnah is going to do is narrow to say, oh yeah, there is such a thing as a person being a ben sorer umoreh, but the definition is so narrow, so small that actually no one has actually ever become it. Now, that is a technique, but why didn't the rabbis just say, I don't agree with this? It's in the Torah, but I don't agree with it, so we're just going to pretend like it doesn't exist. And that's question number one for the day. Why would they do such a why wouldn't they just do that? And the answer is going back to these two definitions from your Edpuzzle, which was the difference between the Oraita and the Rabbanan, right? Stuff that comes from the Torah and stuff that comes from the rabbis. And although we can question and pretend sometimes that rabbi stuff doesn't exist because there's a more important thing, the Oraita stuff that's actually in the Torah, we actually cannot so easily we can't get rid of it. It's there, and by saying it doesn't exist, we're actually lying. It does exist. So the question is, what do we do with it? And the larger question is, how do we uh, suggest kind of our maybe dislike of that? By the way, why would we dislike this part of the Torah? That's question number 2, right? So the rabbis are kind of handcuffed here, and there's someone who's sitting in our class, Oshi, this year. He just came to school new, and he said something like, the Torah also says something like you're allowed to have more than one wife. When we see examples in the early parts of the Torah, a person having more than one wife. So what do we do with that very uncomfortable idea? Well, it's in the Torah, so it's got to be allowed. But in our society today, it's not allowed. So do we pretend like it doesn't exist? Do we pretend like it was never written? Do we pretend like it wasn't there at all? And the rabbis just can't do that. So they say, oh, this is what we'll do. We are banning in banning marrying more than one woman for this number of years, and then we'll come back and look at it again. So they're not saying it doesn't exist. They're saying right now we feel uncomfortable. We're not quite ready to really look at it and judge its merit. So we're going to kind of pretend like, but we're going to put it on the side. So it does exist. And so the question is, how, once we know something is d'oraita, which means what? Question number 3, d'oraita, then we have to deal with it seriously. And so the way the rabbis are going to deal with this is they're going to say at first, there's all different ways that you can become a Ben Surah Moreh. And slowly, the Mishnahs that we're going to look at are going to make it smaller, 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 as if, even though it's on the books, it's as if it technically doesn't exist because no one can actually fit that definition. Or can they? I mean, that's going to be the question. So I want to take back a step back for a second and just remind us that our entire year subject was really about machloket, right? Was about people who are contrary, people who are kind of pushing us. And I want to just kind of understand this question for a second. That in the first semester, we learned that machloket really wasn't such a bad thing after all. That actually there were times when machloket was preferred. Machloket was something that even God was trying to bring about. Now here we see a rule that seems to be, is it pro machloket or anti machloket? That's question number 4. And the answer is it's really anti-machloket because it's saying this is these are people who are machloket makers. These are people who are contrarian. These are people who are criticizers. These are people who are total rebels of your society, totally doing opposite of what people want you to be doing. They are machloket makers. And if we just look at the Torah, we're going to say, wow, the Torah is really against the machloket maker. Not only do we want to kill that machloket maker, but we also want to do something with that machloket maker to teach others about what we believe about machloket. And what is that? That's question number 5. But now all of a sudden we're going to get into some Mishnahs that do something very different with this part of the text. They're actually saying, something else about machloket. They're actually saying, yes, there are machloket makers, and if you find them and kill them, but I'm reducing the number of people that you can actually kill. And so that means the number of machloket makers, if we're reducing the amount of machloket makers that can be killed, the number of machloket makers that will be around is going to go up or go down. That's question number 6. Of course, it's going to go up. So then, is what the Mishnah does, is it supporting the idea of machloket being good, or is it against the idea of machloket being good? That's question number 7. And of course, actually, it's supporting the idea that machloket is a good thing, that we are actually keeping more machloket makers around, and there must be a good reason for that. And maybe the rabbis are looking actually to those beginning stories and saying, well, God kind of liked having the machlokets. God kind of liked having machloket makers around. Yeah, sure, there's this one kind of machloket she'eno l'shem shamayim, that isn't good, but I want to keep machloket makers around. So I'm going to reduce the amount of them that can be killed, reduce the moments where there can be this educational opportunity for people to be like, whoa, I better not be contrarian or else I might be killed as well. So, so let's go. So this was all part of your video, and now kind of we went ahead and we looked at our Mishnah itself, and the Mishnah begins with the idea ben surah moreh me'ematai naseh ben surah moreh. That's the question. A ben surah moreh. At what point in someone's life can someone become a ben surah moreh? And the first statement that comes up is, oh, that is the moment where you have 2 pubic hairs until the entire genitals are surrounded by pubic hair. And so what's the name that we use in modern life, question number 8, to kind of describe that period of time, right? And that we describe that period of time by calling it puberty. And for question number 9, you're going to have to look this up. What is the age span of puberty in our society today? And in class, at least, we came up, and you're going to find that online. What is it? And give me the source for that. And in class, we found out, we said it was probably somewhere from 12 to 22 or something like that. Um, and um, and we also asked the question, well, at this point in the Mishnah, are we talking about boys or men, or are we talking about men and women? So answer that question. And I'm going to answer that question by saying, I think we're talking about men and women, because the next statement that comes is actually going to limit us in the realm of gender. This limitation limits us in the realm of what? Question number 11. Yeah, this part of the Mishnah limits who can become a Ben Surah Mareh to a time period. So it's not all of the life, it's a short period of time called puberty. Now we're going to get another limitation, and that limitation is the next part of our Mishnah, which is it is a ben velo bat, a son and not a daughter, a son and not a daughter. So all of a sudden we have another limitation here, which is a huge limitation, because it's a limitation of what? No, it's not time or age. This is a limitation of question number 12. It's a limitation of gender. Now, we got into some kind of ideas in class about why maybe a girl was excluded, and someone was saying in class, well, maybe it was actually because women actually couldn't even ever fit this definition, because they weren't given the kind of rights to go out and to kind of have there was like an access issue. They could never become a Ben Soreh Moreh because they never had access to all the things that would make you a Ben Soreh U Moreh, that they couldn't disagree in the way that a boy could. So I thought that was a really interesting point. Another thing in class was asked, well, what if a Ben becomes an Abba? What if a Ben gets married and becomes a father? Does that change a marital status? Kind of take him out of that rubric of being able to be charged as a Ben Surah Mareh? That's question number 13. It's just kind of a thought question that I'm giving you. Okay. So, and by the way, this word shene'emar that comes right here means what? That's question number 14. Of course, it means as it says in the Torah. So we should be able to actually look at the Torah text here and find these words, ki yeh le'ish ben. And let's look at that for a second. So where is it in here? There it is right there. Ki yeh le'ish ben, if a man has a stubborn and rebellious son. We're going to skip that question. And then, so we got here a son and not a daughter, a son and not a man. Okay, so here we've limited it as well. We basically said that right. And then we said a katan is patur. A katan is a young child, and they are exempt. Why are they exempt? Shelo bal lichlal mitzvot. Okay, and this is kind of where we ended class. And I asked the class, this is what this is saying, because the katan, the younger child, has not yet been included among the people who can be commanded to do certain mitzvot, certain deeds from the Torah. So there's this idea that once you reach a certain age, then you're obligated to do things, and if you don't do them, then you have done something very, very wrong. But before that age, you are not commanded. And there's actually a life cycle event that we use to mark that moment where your responsibility changes. Do you know what that event is called? And if you don't know it, why don't you look it up? It's a Jewish life cycle event that happens around the age of 12 for a girl, 13 for a boy. So look that up. That's question number 15. Okay. And right, so that is an event that actually is known by a lot of people at TVT, even if you're not Jewish, because it's a big event in a 7th grader's life called a bar or bat mitzvah. And my final question to the class was, why is it that then, if that's such a known event, why didn't we actually write it here? Why didn't we write down a katan is patur because they haven't yet reached the age of bar and bat mitzvah? So what might be your answer to that? That's 16 or 17. And the answer we came up with the class is, maybe the bar and bat mitzvah, or the idea of the bar and bat mitzvah, was not yet invented. Right? And that's kind of where we ended class for the day. Okay, so we stop sharing.